morning. You'll no doubt have heard in the last few days about Councillor Dobson having passed away. Incredibly sad and a formidable character, as we all know. I think dedicated public servant in Collingham for a very long time, and someone that I had just assumed would go on forever, to be honest. She was one of those kind of characters. I certainly think that debate and discussion in this chamber will not be the same as we go forward. Speaks to her character, I think, that the last conversation she had with me as leader of the council, despite knowing about her illness, was not about her. It was about making sure that when she wasn't here, I was still talking about buses in Collingham and flood relief in various villages, even without her influence, which is a testament to the kind of character and the kind of commitment to her community. So important to recognise this morning, and I'm just going to ask everybody to stand just for a moment of silence to remember Maureen this morning. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I will certainly miss her. I'm sure others will as well. And there will be opportunities, no doubt, over the course of the next few weeks and months to pay tribute to Councillor Dobson, not least at our next full council meeting. And we'll make sure that that's on the agenda for everybody to be able to share their thoughts and memories. But thank you for that this morning. We'll plough on with the agenda. So minutes of the previous meeting. Any particular thoughts, concerns, dramas related to those minutes? No, good. Apologies for absence. I think we've got some substitutions this morning. I will go. So I have Councillor Purdue-Horan has replaced Councillor David Martin. Substitutions this morning. Helen Ann Smith sends apologies for other reasons. Councillor Deakin substituting Dave Shaw. Apologies for medical reasons. Daniel Williamson is substituting. Bruce Lawson is on other county council business. Councillor Richard Butler is substituting. Neil Clark is away for medical reasons. Councillor John Ogle is here in his place. Councillor Fole for medical reasons, and Councillor Pringle is substituting, and Councillor Zadrozny for medical reasons. Councillor Andy Meakin is substituting. Any further apologies? We've got a few changes to the roster this morning, but that is fine. Councillor Purdue-Horan.
I'll get it clarified later for you, Mr. Chairman, but I think I might be a permanent addition to the policy committee.
Yes, that is correct. It's on my list. Apologies if that wasn't clear, but that is true. Any further comments on any of that? No. Welcome to all the fine, fresh new faces to policy committee. Declarations of interest. No, fabulous. We'll move on to the business proper then, and agenda item 4, improving outcomes for survivors of domestic abuse. Obviously, hugely important issue, and you'll no doubt have seen in recent days and weeks that we have sought to highlight that through the ribbons that we wore at full council, through lighting up the building in support of wider national campaigns last week. Incredibly complex and multifaceted problem, but County Council working hard on our statutory duty to protect local residents and safeguard them where possible. I'm going to ask Councillor Elliott to propose this, please.
Thank you, Ben. I'll pick up where the leaders left off. So to introduce a report, the improving outcomes for survivors of domestic abuse. Domestic abuse is a complex and multifaceted problem affecting a wide range of people and requires comprehensive services and systems to tackle the issues effectively. The authority is driving strategic change through partnership and leadership, delivering the strategic vision, which is to make Nottinghamshire a place where survivors of domestic abuse receive the support they need to feel safe and rebuild their lives. Perpetrators are held to account for their actions by the police, criminal justice systems, and wider services. Communities recognise and respond to domestic abuse early to prevent abuse from happening and support survivors and their families. The Domestic Abuse Act 2021 gives Nottinghamshire County Council, as a lead authority, statutory duties for commissioning domestic abuse support services for adults and children within safe accommodation. There is a requirement within the duty for the authority to have a new domestic abuse strategy by the 5th of January 2022. The report recommendations are listed on page 4. I will read them out. Okay, so recommendation 1, to approve the ongoing approach to develop the Nottinghamshire Domestic Abuse Strategy with additional chapters to be approved by Adult Social Care and Public Health Committee. So it's going to come to my committee shortly. Recommendation 2, to approve the Nottinghamshire Domestic Abuse Strategy, which is shared with us in Appendix A. Happy to propose those recommendations. Do I have a seconder?
Second those, Chair, and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Director of Public Health with us here this morning. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Jonathan?
Just very briefly, good morning, councillors. And I'll just ask Rebecca to, my colleague, to draw out one or two of the really kind of salient points from the report in a moment. Before I do that, as it turns out, I could and should have advised Councillor Elliott, as Chair of the Adult Social Care Committee, that in fact Adult Social Care and Public Health Committee was in a position to review and to approve this paper. I apologise to Councillor and to Policy Committee that I didn't do that. However, as you've noted, Chair, it is such an important agenda. I'm really pleased that we've had opportunity to bring it here as well. And I'll just invite Rebecca to pick out one or two points from the report, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have developed a strategy which goes further than we were asked by the government. So rather than just focusing the strategy on safe accommodation, we recognise that safe accommodation is one element of domestic abuse, addressing domestic abuse, and we needed to put that into the wider context of all of the other points that actually affect individuals who are living in situations where domestic abuse is taking place. So that's why we have a report structure which is developed into chapters, and we intend for the wider chapters to be completed in partnership with a range of different organisations, and also linking very closely with survivors and our support services across the county. This strategy will be something that will be continually reviewed and developed depending upon both the government changes in guidance and policy advice, reflecting developments with the Victims Act and also the wider Violence Against Women and Girls strategy. And it will also be required to be a partnership approach with our Police and Crime Commissioner. We are focusing initially on safe accommodation, as that's the requirement to have that part completed by the 5th of January. And we are then proposing to focus on the next two chapters, which are children and young people and high-risk survivors. And we aim to have those completed by the end of March. I'm happy to take any further questions.
Thank you very much. I don't know if there are any other officers who want to speak to that. Happy enough. Okay, don't know. Okay, no problem. Anyone else wish to speak on this agenda item? Mike.
Thanks, Chairman. And we welcome the report, as I'm sure we all do. It's absolutely the right thing to do and the right thing to move forward with. What we'd certainly like to see is an accommodation update, because the ability to move those who are being threatened into accommodation needs updating, because we recognise that there are several different cohorts and questions raised at some points between different charities or support groups that sometimes trip each other up. So I think that would be something that would we would look forward to. But a regular report in the next step chapter here today, I think will be something that will be positive for us all here. And point 1.1, the strategic leadership. Again, there's no membership involvement within the committee. I think that's an opportunity lost for members and recognition and for the scrutiny of all members, irrespective of who it is. So if we can look at changing that in some way, I think that will be positive. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I don't know if there's officers want to respond to that yet.
Thank you. Yeah, so we'd be pleased to make sure that the needs assessment that we undertake is updated routinely and regularly to make sure that it's current. In terms of your second point, Councillor Pringle, in terms of member involvement in that board, we're following at the moment guidance provided by government, and certainly if that's changed or adjusted, then we'd be pleased to make allowance for that in regard to the involvement of members. At the moment, that's the guidance that we're working to.
Am I right in thinking, Jonathan, Councillor Elliott mentioned that further updates and chapters this were due to come to Health and to the Adult Social Care Committee?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So opportunities for members to scrutinise further.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Michelle.
Yeah, I just want to touch on a couple of things. The first thing is with regards to the safe accommodation element. There's a bit that's always seems to be missing when we're talking about safe accommodation for people suffering from domestic violence, and that's appropriate accommodation. All too often we're seeing scenarios where mums and children are put in hotel rooms or bed sits for quite a considerable amount of time, and I know that happens, for example, in Gedling. So the review with regards to what's our starting point with regards to accommodation and where do we aim to be in 12 months, 18 months time is absolutely essential as far as I'm concerned, because it's not appropriate for a family to be in a hotel room for 3 or 4 months at a time where they've got nowhere to cook any food when actually they are a victim. They haven't done anything wrong themselves. It also makes them quite vulnerable, and very often they go back to their perpetrators because they feel that they need to provide their children with a bedroom, etc., etc. So that's something from the ground. The other thing I wanted to just mention as well is how we link in with regards to children and young people. I'm dealing with a case at the moment where father, domestic abuse, mum has come away from it. The child is 13, when it happened was 13 years old and witnessed a lot of abuse in her household. 18 months down the line, she's still waiting for support from CAMHS. Now this child is really, really suffering with her mental health with regards to what she's witnessed and what she's seen. So whilst I wholeheartedly I support this strategy, of course I do, anything that helps people in this situation, it's that old thing that we go back to between report and reality. So I think we need to be really honest and open about our starting point of where we are at the moment and where we intend to be in 12 months' time, because children waiting 12 or 18 months for support with regards to mental health that have witnessed ongoing domestic abuse is not acceptable, and we need to be quite open about that. So that's my standing point with regards to this. I could say a lot more, but I'm not going to. But if we could keep an eye on what's happening and perhaps establish a more realistic starting point as to where we are, that would be really useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to respond to that, Jonathan?
Yeah, if I may, thank you. And thank you for your comments, Councillor Welsh. And yes, you're absolutely right. It's essential that the accommodation is suitable, and that along with that survivors receive the support that they need while they're in that accommodation as well. And part of what we'll be doing through this in Nottinghamshire is ensuring that there's really close collaboration, not only from the County Council, but between the County Council and with districts and boroughs, who of course are the housing authorities with some of the statutory duties around this. We're pleased to be working with them very closely already, and I think the opportunity is there for us to strengthen arrangements in just the way that you've described. In terms of waiting times for CAMS, I'd be pleased to take that away and to raise that with the local NHS, who of course are the commissioners of the service.
Thanks, Jonathan. Worth saying, obviously, the wider, we saw through the council plan and other elements in the last few weeks, the wider kind of transformation work in terms of access to those frontline services that's beginning, if not ongoing. So lots of work to do on that. Councillor Guilfoyle, and then I'll come.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of things. One is in relation to collaboration and you know, domestic violence is an issue that's got to be dealt with by collaboration. There are so many facets to it. But also with other authorities apart from the ones within Nottinghamshire. People, you know, will know if they've been dealing with victims. Sometimes it's not in their best interest to actually be in Nottinghamshire. Not just move from, say, Bassetlaw to Gedling or whatever. They need to get out of, and I just wondered, within the accommodation strategy, how the relationship we've got with other authorities across the country, because you know there are cases where they just need to get out and not necessarily be located in Nottinghamshire. And I think that's ought to be an important part of this strategy. The other one is just on some of the dates, just for clarification. Obviously, if you look at the on page 14 of 64, the contents, and it goes in introduction, safe accommodation, and then the dates. And I believe they are the dates, I'm presuming, that when the reports were started or concluded by. Because I've just got a concern that the actual policy is from 21 to 24, and we won't be looking at some of the issues while 23. And for me, you know, in reality, I don't think some of those things can wait, you know, because the strategy will be sort of nearly completed, and we'll be perhaps reviewing it, yet we've not completed some of the key elements. And in particular, one key element is about perpetrators and trying to adjust individuals' behaviour. And we know, you know, with all the things that's been happening, etc., that is a key element. And I'm just wondering that, you know, leaving it while that time to sort of review. Now, I know that will take and may need resources, and I know the team that are in public health that have been dealing with this have also got another big agenda that they've been dealing with, and some work has had to drop. But I actually think this is a key policy for this council and for the people out there. And I mean, you know, we all wore our white ribbons for this week, and I would hate to think that we sort of talk the talk, but we don't actually make it work. So, you know, could we have a review of some of those timescales?
Thanks, Clint. I mean, worth saying that it's a review of existing policies, so it's not that these things aren't happening currently. But I totally take the point you're making. And I don't know, Rebecca, did you want to respond to the other point?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll respond to both points if you allow me, Chair. The first point you mentioned regarding collaboration and working with other authorities. We are working really closely with our district and borough councils, and we also work very closely with the City Council as well around our strategy. However, the requirement for housing sits with our district and borough councils, so we are supporting them where they agree to consider reciprocal arrangements with other councils from across the country. The only challenge with that is that reciprocal arrangements aren't necessarily always what survivors want. So if Bassetlaw, for instance, were to make a reciprocal arrangement with another area in Newcastle, a woman or man may not wish to go to Newcastle. They may wish to go somewhere very different. So it's about working with survivors around where they would like to go, and then linking with those councils and allowing the relationships to evolve. The system for domestic abuse is a national system, so it does allow for all of our refuge provision and wider provision to be listed on something called Routes to Support, which is a women's aid linked system which shows every single bed that's available across the country. So women are able to go to what is available, but obviously we recognise that there are challenges around how much accommodation is available to meet the current need. With your comments about the dates, I completely accept that the dates of 2023 does seem a long way away. Please feel reassured that there is activity taking place at the moment on all of these agendas. However, what we wanted to do was to ensure that we could do a complete needs assessment of each point and then look to weave these needs assessments together so that we have a full picture. The reason for perpetrators being number 8 on the list is not to say that they are the least important or that this does not need to be looked at, but we have received as an area some additional funding for a pilot programme on perpetrators at the moment. So that's being piloted, and the pilot will be evaluated, and that evaluation will be completed towards the end of 2022. So we were awaiting the information from that evaluation before starting the extra piece of work around the needs assessment. I hope that answers all your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Councillor Deakin.
Thank you, Chair. Really welcome the report. It's something that we all need to make sure that it's always at the forefront and that we're always thinking about, to be fair. And we're all highly aware that the abuse figures, it's so underreported that the actual cases is so much higher. We're just very, very unaware of it. It's a little bit of a theme from what I spoke about on Thursday, really. It's the communication aspects of it and how we're doing, because I can't say that I've got the solution, but I know that we always go down we do a lot on social media, and we do that very, very well, which is great for a lot of people, but it doesn't reach those who are really struggling, does it? It doesn't reach those who are scared, and it's just those other options that we can do as well, so that it's in the supermarket if that's the only time that they might be able to see that poster of where that help is available and that sort of stuff. So it's just about the communication aspect and making sure we're doing as much as we can. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Really important. And across all sorts of services, we know that the ones who most need support are often the most difficult ones to reach. So that's a very fair point. I don't know if there's anything you want to touch on that, or...
No, I'm happy to take that away. We are, as part of the duty, we've got a communications element to that, and we're working really closely with our partners, including Equation, who are an expert in the field. They are going to be working with both our communication partners in the districts and borough councils alongside other communication partners within our delivery support services. So I think it's about not having one route and having many different routes to meet the wide variety of needs that are out there, and to help to reach as many people as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Keith, and then Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure this is for this committee, or maybe either Adult Social Care and Health or Children and Young People's Services, but Rebecca spoke about a list of available accommodation throughout the country. I think it would be a good idea to have an overview of the accommodation available throughout the county, so we can identify gaps, and there's a lot of double hatters here, and if there are any gaps, maybe some encouragement to our district and borough partners for that provision, and I think that would just help us gel then in terms of providing a suitable, appropriate accommodation in the right areas.
Thanks, Keith. All of that tying together the work we do with districts and boroughs, as you know, is top of the agenda currently. I don't know if that's something to just take away, or is there anything you want to say on that?
Something I can take away and work with Councillor Elliott on, I think, in due course. Thank you.
We have completed a needs assessment which does list all of the accommodation that's available. So, Councillor Girling, I can send you a link to that needs assessment.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
I think it'd be helpful so we can have a overall picture rather than, you know, sort of numbers. We can put them on a map, have a look and do that.
We don't tend to give that level of detail because obviously refuge provision is required to be not as open due to the safety risks to those individuals who are living within that accommodation. I think the reality is that we have currently got 40 units of accommodation, so 40 families can be provided with support across the council area. That is not enough, but we need to look at accommodation pathways that are both about making people's homes safe for them to stay in their own homes if that's what they require, for people to be able to go to outside of the county if that is also what they require, and for those who do come into the county, some of which are not from Nottinghamshire, for them to be able to then move out of refuge accommodation into long-term safe accommodation. So it's about all of those pathways linking together. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. It would be worth, as you say, Keith, having particularly those colleagues perhaps who have leadership roles at some of those district and boroughs, if there are particular challenges or gaps, to be able to share that and take that away, that'd be helpful. Richard?
Thank you. Yes, just going back to working with partners, are we going to be working with the likes of, there's one that comes to mind that I know of, J9, that I've had quite a lot of involvement with over the last year or so, because it just happens to be set up by one of my residents. So they're doing the sort of the separate, private, call them what you will, community groups are doing their thing to offer safe refuges, put stickers on shop windows and so on if someone's feeling in danger. Are we linking in with the likes of them to ensure that we're not stepping on toes or missing something accidentally? And whilst everyone's got the best of intentions, sometimes too many people chasing the same problem at the time can be a bit of a problem. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's about bringing all of those communication and promotion agendas together. So as a council, we already commission Equation as our prevention, promotion and training provider. So we've asked them to pull together the resources to ensure that Help a Friend or the identifying of safe spaces is really clearly shared and promoted across the council. The difficulty we do have is that there are a number of different initiatives, and that can dilute the message, and it can make it very difficult for providers and also difficult for survivors to remember each one of those messages. So that's something that we're looking at taking forwards.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Sorry, just picking up on a couple of the points that have been raised by colleagues and something that you said, Rebecca. So we did a scrutiny some years ago now in relation to provision within the county, and what was identified at the time was that there were some areas where there was multi-provision, there was an overlap effectively, and then other areas where there was little or no provision. So I suppose I'm looking for some reassurance that the service that we provide is uniform across the county, in the sense that there are no blank spots. There are no areas where you are less likely to be supportive or supported than there are other areas. And you mentioned 40 units not being enough. Do you have a figure for the average occupancy rate in respect of those 40 units, 60, 70, 80, or is it 100% occupancy and we're having to export the issue effectively? And the average time for rehousing. So where you have victims who are in temporary accommodation, that effectively they are not likely to return to the family home, a place where they may be in danger, and there is an intention to permanently rehouse. What sort of timelines are we looking at for that, effectively, for that process to take place? And I think that was just picking up on a point I think that Councillor Guilfoyle raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Occupancy rates are quite difficult for me to comment upon. Occupancy rates, our refuges are always full or being cleaned or renovated. So the 40 units are 100% occupancy in that respect. The average time that a family is in refuge, it depends upon their needs, and it also depends, some do go back to perpetrators because refuge is not the right for them at that point. So it all depends upon the individual. It is not uncommon for families to be in refuge for 6 months. I think one of the things that we recognise is the big challenge is the delay in suitable accommodation becoming available and the movement out of refuge. So one of the things that we've done within our commissioning strategy is to look at how do we help to unblock some of those pathways by providing flexible funding options to both district and borough councils and our refuges to enable the unblocking of those systems without it being massively bureaucratic, which I think is a really innovative approach to consider that we don't know all of the things that block systems currently and how do we unblock those more easily. The challenge around timescales is regarding the challenges within the wider housing sector at the moment. So we know that there are long waiting lists for housing within all authorities across the country. And the government have made domestic abuse a higher priority within the prioritisation process. But that does not mean that people go through that system very quickly. So unfortunately, as Councillor Welsh raised, there are people who are in temporary accommodation who would be better within other accommodation, and there are people who are in refuge who are looking to be moved into long-term safe accommodation options. But if you have 8 kids, or if you have and you don't have any furniture and resources, it's quite challenging. So we've got to work within the systems that we've got, but what we are trying to do as an authority is to ensure that we're unblocking the systems where we can, and we're working alongside our district and borough councils to identify options as quickly as possible, and they're working really hard on that.
Thank you very much. Mike, did you want to come back in, and then I'll go to Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, sorry, just to follow on from Councillor Barnfather, really, in respect to the 40 accommodations that we say we've had, and you're saying that they're constantly full, and that raises huge issues again. Not necessarily due to the demand, because demand's the last thing we want, but if they're constantly full and we're still not meeting the needs, then I don't think we've got a better time now with your lead in talking to district and borough councils with your executive to actually follow this on and really cement something for the future, if it's double or whatever. But 40 homes that are completely full all the time, we need to address this, and we need to address it now. And as I say, I think you might be able to lead in this with the discussions with district and boroughs, to be honest.
Thanks, Mike. Do you want to touch on that, Jonathan? Yeah.
So I think a number of the questions really underline, don't they, the fact that we're working in a system here. This is about county council working with districts, boroughs and others. The needs assessment that we've got around accommodation, suitable accommodation with support, I think we'll pick up some of the points that Councillor Barnfather and Councillor Pringle have made. And yes, we've got opportunity as well to work with district and borough chief execs, and indeed with their members as well through members of committee. And we'll be pleased to pick up those opportunities in due course.
Thanks, Jonathan. A fair point, as Mike says, if it comes through that assessment that there is more close working that needs to happen through those networks and the EPC conversations that we're having, happy to take that up. So trust that officers will bring that back to us if that's necessary. Councillor Taylor, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Chairman. I suppose it's just to make a few observations on children and young people in these circumstances. Firstly, to say thank you to officers and partners for the work that's gone into this so far, and the work that I know is continuing. Still a heck of a lot to do, I realise. It's to be noted that we are approaching this in such a different way. Children cannot be invisible in domestic abuse situations. They have been in the past. I'm grateful that we realise that could not continue and that they are no longer invisible. Several colleagues across the chamber have touched on accommodation, and my sort of thoughts and notes about that as I was listening to people. When families are fleeing abuse, there is the need in the moment to be in a place of safety, but there's also the need to find a place to call home. And one of the biggest impacts for children and young people is the dislocation on their entire lives of that act of fleeing to a place of safety. Whether they are in a refuge or a hotel room in the immediate moment, it may be necessary for them to have all networks dislocated, be that their education, be that their sports teams, their uniformed groups, whether you go to the Cubs or anything else. For children, their entire lives can just implode at the point that somebody makes the decision to change their situation and remove them to a point of safety. All of those issues are complex, and I realise there is no easy fix for any of that, because what you're actually trying to do is rebuild lives and networks, and actually give children support structures again. So for me, I'm very heavily focused on making sure we reference in the report at 1.3 and 2.3 co-production with survivors, including male survivors and children, and the voice of the child for me is incredibly important, you won't be surprised to hear, and that there are trauma-informed therapeutic support pathways for them. That's critical. An adult's resilience may be worn down by the experience they're having. A child does not have that resilience to draw on to begin with. They can be crushed in moments, and they have no other life to draw on to give them any resilience. So I'm grateful for those. I mean, it makes fairly chilling reading to look at elements of the report that there are just under 1,100 children under the age of 18 years affected by domestic abuse. And that's just looking at the MARAC figures. That there were, as of December last year, this time last year, an estimated 252 people aged 0 to 17 living in refuge. Those figures are stark for us as a county area, and I'm grateful that we are putting those figures in, that we are focused on them. The needs are also not just in the moment, they are ongoing, and they may perhaps last a lifetime. Certainly they'll be long term. So I suppose my plea on behalf of the children and young people is that we continue to focus on that dislocation, that dysfunction, their needs for network security, stability in their lives, and that this will be a long haul. We won't fix this through a report. We won't fix it through any solution that's got a short-term date on it. This is the long haul. I'm in it for the long haul. I hope that the rest of us are too. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Well said. And highlighting the importance of this piece of work, which, as you say, is a very long-term and eternal process, really. We'll never get it perfect or absolutely right, but certainly we can make huge inroads through this review and this strategy. If that is everybody who wishes to speak, then I'll just ask for a show of hands in favour of approving the report. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is the resourcing requirements for the Nottingham and Nottinghamshire case for devolution. In very short, and then I'll ask the Chief Executive to perhaps add anything further. The Economic Prosperity Committee, which is our joint working committee with district and borough and city colleagues, have been working, as you know, on both a case for devolution to our county and also cross-council working on various areas from economy to transport to children's services and all sorts of other things. An intensive piece of work that requires some additional resource. That additional resource is not additionally coming from our budget, but is from a pooled business rates pot, which is set aside for the Economic Prosperity Committee specifically for economic development. Normally it is not spent, so I'm pleased actually that we are finding useful things to do with that money set aside for this purpose. The funding itself has already been agreed by the Economic Prosperity Committee from that pool, which is set aside, as I say, for that group. The report today asks us to confirm that we as a council are willing to do the actual recruitment of this team of people to deliver that transformation work. Worth saying also that regardless of the devolution element of it, which we're very hopeful and optimistic about, even without that, that joint working with our district and borough colleagues will continue, and this resource will still be very much needed. I don't know, Anthony, if you've got anything further to add.
Thank you, Chair, but no, that was very comprehensive, but I'm very happy to answer any questions that might come up during the debate.
Thank you very much. That was me proposing it, so I am more than happy to propose this to the council. I've got a seconder. Gordon.
Thank you, Ben. Very happy to second and reserve the right to speak. Thank you, Ben.
Mike.
Thanks, Chairman. Welcome the obvious need for a team to be put in position that makes complete sense, and I hope that in choosing the team it's successful, because we're expecting the team to work extremely hard and bring billions upon billions into Nottinghamshire through your lead. So we're hopeful that that's going to be a positive team. Will the team be working outside of just membership? Will they be working to public comments, public intervention, public ideas? I think that would be something that would be open. I know through my notes, Derek has opened that up as a continuous working paper, in effect, and I think this might be something that might be beneficial to us at some point. I'm just wondering, when obviously we see that the district and boroughs have got a 60% split, so we're going to vote on this today, and we recognise the move for devolution. Have district and borough councils already agreed the sums of money through their district and boroughs, through their memberships, in which case we're just topping that up, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. On the second point, and I'll ask Anthony to comment perhaps on the first one. So the funding was already, as I say, set aside for the Economic Prosperity Committee. So that is a decision effectively for that committee as to whether to spend it on this. That decision was taken on the 29th of October and approved by all of those districts and boroughs. That was a unanimous decision at the EPC. So the question today, as I say, is in many ways we are the obvious place to actually host those members of staff. So it's a slightly different decision today. Anthony, did you want to touch on any other?
Only one thing, otherwise your explanations are rendering me redundant, happily. So the EPC, as the chairman has said, Mike, has the authority to approve expenditure from the rates pool. Doesn't need to go back to each district or borough or county council for that. They can make that decision, and they did. On the engagement with the public, that's a very good point. One of the posts here is a communications post, and I'll be asking them through the offices of Luke Barrett to work with Derek and colleagues that have been managing the ongoing dialogue with the public to make sure that we engage the public in respect of not just devolution but the benefits of joint working, because I think there's something symbolic about that, all councils pulling together, devolution deal or not.
Anybody further wish to speak to this? Chris?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I don't take the credit for coming up with this question, but on page 33, it lists a number of posts which add up to 8 posts, and in the recommendation it approves an establishment of 7 full-time equivalent posts. I just wondered what the differential was.
That is a very perceptive question. This is where I prefer to defer to the officers.
And I'd like to know, put you up to it. It looks to me like that might be a basic error of mathematics. So we probably need to amend the recommendation, Chris, to make sure the two things tie up.
I think that was the purpose behind the question.
I'm sure it was. Thank you.
Consider it amended. Very good. Thank you. Michelle.
You may or may not know the answer to this, but with regards to the posts, will they be external appointments, or are you looking to use people that are already within the local authority? Is my first question. And my second question is, sorry, I've still got my last one. My second question, which you in part answered with regards to the EPC being able to approve the expenditure. I'm constantly aware that of especially residents in my ward are keeping their eye on this devolution process quite avidly, and our local council spending, while it may not seem a lot, actually to people in our ward, 38,571 per council could seem quite significant. It's what I'm assuming that goes for a delegated decision process at a local council. What would happen next, and what is being recommended with EPC with regards to recording that expenditure at a local level? Because I think that is really, really important, because I'm voting on something today that I'm aware hasn't been through any democratic process at Gedling Borough Council, for example, and as from what I can gather, it's not on any delegated decision record of any council in Nottinghamshire yet, and I think that needs dealing with quite swiftly. And then last but not least is public involvement with regards to this and how it moves on. You've talked quite clearly about having somebody with regards to a senior communications officer, which I actually think is really critical in all of this, because creating a really good understanding of what devolution, if we look at what has happened in the Greater Manchester, the communications that they've done with people has been second to none. So, yeah, it's how will we get further information as it moves on as to how we're involving public in this and how we're consulting with them as we move along this journey, because it is, you will be aware that it's something that we need to take people along with us if we're really going to achieve what needs to be achieved with regards to devolution.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I'll touch on that and then I'll ask Chief Executive to pick up on the more detailed points. But on communication, absolutely right. We found, and certainly when we've been around this loop many times in the past, as not having a very clear and united message about what this means and what impact it will have on residents has been a genuine problem and led to us not being able to do it in the past. So it's really important that we do have that. That's why we're trying to work through the EPC to make sure we've got all of our district and borough colleagues on message as well, and that we're all agreeing on what this is about. In terms of the specifics of that, Anthony mentioned Luke Barrett and the comms team earlier on, who have started to put together some views and reports on how that might work, on what engagement, what the messages might be from a public relations perspective. Difficult to pin down precise details until we know a little bit more about what government wants in terms of structures and precisely how it will work. But that's absolutely a work in progress, and absolutely recognise that although concepts, devolution and development corporations and free ports and all the things that probably mean absolutely nothing to most people are very high level, we need to explain the benefits to residents and make sure that that is clear. So absolutely with you on that one. Anthony, do you want to pick up on the others?
Yeah, and all very good questions. Thank you very much. So the first one on the recruitment strategy, Michelle, in the first instance, we're sending it out to those public service agencies across Nottinghamshire who are in membership of what we call the Chief Officers Forum. So that's not just local authorities, that's police, fire, health, because given that these are 12-month fixed-term posts, the likelihood is we'll get people coming forward on secondment rather than permanent appointments. If that doesn't work, we will advertise them externally. We expect we'll know whether we've got enough take-up to fill all the posts, hopefully by the end of this calendar year. So if we need to go to an external recruitment strategy, we'll do that in the new year. The way that we will report all of this back is through the EPC primarily, but given this is such a big issue for this council, the leader has asked me to bring regular reports to Policy Committee about the progress with the devolution deal. That will include progress with communications and the engagement of the public. The technical point you raised about whether any of this needs signing off back in the individual councils who are in membership of the EPC depends, I think, on the way the individual councils set up their arrangements in respect of the EPC. We revised the terms of reference for the EPC back in 2019 to include authority for the EPC to spend the rates pool. So I don't think, unless there's a specific arrangement in Gedling Borough Council, in this case, for that to be reported back into Gedling Borough Council, added to key decision logs and delegated decisions taken, it would be necessary, unless that's specifically written in to the arrangements at Gedling Borough Council or any council in membership of the EPC. So I'm guessing that your leader, for example, would have come to the EPC on the 29th of October, understanding that he had the authority to sign off the expenditure. However, if for the sake of transparency, he wants to report that within Gedling Borough Council and engage the wider members of Gedling Borough Council, he'd be perfectly at liberty to do so in the same way that we will through this committee.
Thanks, Anthony. I think the direct decision that districts and boroughs would have made back in the day would have been to give the EPC the ability to host and spend that funding rather than the kind of day-to-day decision now. But in the same way that we continuously report back here, I'm sure that district and borough colleagues are doing the same in their own councils. Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and apologies to Councillor Pringle if I'm repeating his question, because I blame it all on his mic. I couldn't hear everything he was saying. So, but I just want to be clear on one or two things, if I may. First of all, I welcome the report, and I certainly welcome what appears to be a completely different approach in this administration to discussions in collaboration with our partners across the county. I just want to ask about the issue with Nottingham City Council. They are to provide contributions in kind. So as well as the 180,000 that the County Council will provide, each district will provide just over 38,500. Now, actually, I have it on good authority, and Councillor Butler will agree with me on this, that would not be a problem for Rushcliffe. Whatever you want to check, you'll have it tomorrow, no problem. But I am concerned that that's probably not the case with all councils across the every penny matters. So I suppose my question is, the in-kind contributions that Nottingham City Council will be contributing, can you give us an assurance that no other resource will be taken out of any other authorities further down the line?
Thanks,
and
Francis.
also I have a second question. Apologies, second question. I was stopped in Bingham Marketplace last Friday at the Christmas fair, and a constituent did ask, is this a backdoor plan to somehow mitigate the levels of debt that Nottingham City Council has on its books? And I think that sort of concern probably is agreed with a lot of other people.
Thanks, Francis. I'll ask the Chief Exec to just touch on the practicalities of the flow of money. I can assure you I imagine it's not a case of going and asking anybody for a cheque, but I'm sure Anthony can clarify that. I think in terms of Nottingham City Council, we're very keen for them to be partners in this work. I think economically, geographically, it makes much more sense to include the city, which is hugely important for us in terms of our wider prosperity in the county, as you know. So we want to work closely with them. I really welcome the way that they've approached this, but recognise that they haven't got any money. So it is challenging from that perspective. They do have significant expertise within the council, and they do have the ability, we talked about secondment and various other elements, ways that this could work, and we are having that ongoing conversation with the city. It's also incumbent on government in the wider conversation about devolution, what structures and how they want it to work, to tell us exactly how they want that relationship with the city to work as well. So there's an element of that we're still waiting to figure out, but certainly there is no sense that district or borough councils are going to be asked to additionally fund things in the absence of the city being able to do so, if that's what you were getting at. The city's wider budget problems or debt problems don't directly link into any of this. There's no sense, again, that any money is going from county, district or boroughs into the city. From that perspective, the staffing will be held here. So this particular funding will go effectively from those places to us in order to resource this, not to the City Council from that perspective. So hopefully that allays some of those fears. In terms of the practicalities of funding, I don't know if there's anything to add on that, Anthony.
It's a really good explanation. Again, what I would say in supplement is that in a partnership, there's an expectation, whether it's written down or informal, that every partner pulls their weight, makes their contribution. The City Council have never been part of the rates pool, so under any circumstances their contribution would be separate, either in cash or in kind. In this instance, they prefer to make it in kind. So far, I can assure you that at an executive level and in terms of their officer contribution, they have pulled their weight. They've been a willing partner. They've made a significant contribution. They're leading on the strand on economic recovery and development, and doing so very well. We haven't put a price to that. I couldn't tell you whether it amounts to the same contribution that other councils are making, both in cash and in kind. If we get a devolution deal, there is no doubt we will need to re-evaluate the sufficiency of resource, particularly leadership resource, because at the moment the chief executives of the councils are providing that. Any devolution deal that either we've been part of previously or elsewhere in the country does suck out leadership resource, so we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. But of course we may be offered capacity building funding by government. I know that's a live issue for those areas that are talking to government about devolution deals, so that it's not just local taxpayers that are taking the strain, and perhaps government might contribute something as well. So I think this is an evolving picture, and through subsequent reports to Policy Committee we can keep colleagues up to date, including the sort of contributions in kind that councils are making.
Thank you. It's worth saying, I think, and we've touched on it earlier on, that with or without devolution, the collaborative working we're doing with councils requires resource and the ability to plan those themes of work and to put all of that into practice. So one way or another, this work will continue. But if there are additional things that come from government, we would hope and expect that there would be support to build that resource in order, or capacity in order to add to those things as well. I had Richard next.
Thank you, Ben. Well, really, I can't really speak on behalf of Rushcliffe Borough Council, obviously, and there are other colleagues here from Rushcliffe Borough Council, but I would assure Councillor Purdue-Horan and everyone else that Rushcliffe, along with all the other council partners, will be making their own decisions and watching expense very carefully, wealthy authority or not. So be assured that I'm sure Rushcliffe and indeed all the other partners and councils will be watching with great interest to see how it all develops, and so far I've been very supportive, and we'll watch with interest.
Thanks, Richard. They have indeed, and I have to say we've been, I say we as an authority, we've been around this loop before. I certainly feel that the conversations have been very constructive. I certainly feel that all the partners involved in those conversations have been constructive and helpful. We are working really positively towards putting the flesh on the kind of bones of a devolution proposal and on the collaborative working that kind of fits very neatly within that work. We're working on a number of themes, some of which is about devolved powers and funding, but some of it is things we can do anyway. And as I say, we will seek to do, regardless of government's decision about devolution. It has been really positive, and I think that's worth recognising and putting on record that thanks to all of the district, borough and city colleagues who are being really positive and supportive on this piece of work. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this before I move on? I'll come to Councillor Wheeler then in that case.
Thank you, Ben. Much appreciated. Just echo what's just been said about the City Council. Now, they may be short of cash, we'll leave that to one side, but having previously chaired the Joint Strategic Committee, I know the wealth of talent that exists within their officer ranks in City Council. And to be able to tap into that level of talent, which we are clearly going to do, is great news. It is really wonderful news. So, no doubt whatsoever, they may not be able to pull up the cash up front straight away, but the talent that exists is something we will definitely be buying into, and I welcome that. I really do. you've just said, Ben, and I naturally agree with what you've just said about closer working relations. That's a wonderful thing to be able to do. Getting communication message out there is important, very, very important. I know we're looking to actually beef up our own comms team, and that's a paper coming before personnel this month, and I welcome that paper as well. So, very happy to second this. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you very much. On that note, ask colleagues to recognise the recommendations here, which, as I say, I repeat, are not to agree or disagree the funding, which is already done elsewhere, but to agree that Nottinghamshire County Council can recruit and host this team. So I ask those in favour of the report to raise their hands. Thank you very much. That is approved. Right, we'll move on to agenda item number 6, which is our highways review. We have touched on this in various other places around the council, but we did promise that we would bring it back to policy committee to go through with this group. A really significant piece of work, and again, collaborative cross-party piece of work. I'm very grateful for everybody's involvement and engagement in that. There were over 50 recommendations that came from it, some of which are a bit dry, some of which are a bit contractual or a bit, I know, sorry Adrian, some of which are a bit behind the scenes from a public perspective, some of which will be highly important to our residents. So I'll flag the ones that residents may be most interested in, not least the drive to shift from a quick fix emergency solution to a more long-term permanent repair wherever possible. Even if that takes us a bit longer to do, we'd rather get it right the first time. I think that is important and residents will want to hear that. And equally to take a whole street approach to those repairs with a central database that will tell us if we're going to fix a pothole on Church Street, we will also try to deal with the other problems and challenges on Church Street at the same time, rather than continuing to return on a regular basis. There are other recommendations around the way we communicate with residents, making sure we're properly explaining what it is we're doing and why, and the timescales, as well as having a longer-term approach to budgeting around this, so that VIA and the council can properly plan a long-term approach to repairs and road surfacing renewals and everything else. Make sure that residents, even if it's not going to happen imminently, they are aware that they are on the list and we are planning to do the work on their street. I hope that will be of some comfort, perhaps, to residents who have raised this consistently with us over many months and years, and we've made good progress, I think, over the last 6 months. So thank you again to all those colleagues who supported this on the committee. I am more than happy to propose this report and recommendations. Have I got somebody to second that? John?
Yes, Chairman. It's a high-quality report. High level of acceptance of the review findings from the people involved. The purpose of the report is on page 1, number 1. We had cross-party membership, including an unaligned independent. We had 5 meetings, some were all-day meetings, including demonstrations by VIA. We had a whole day at the Billthorpe depot looking at how they did things. We had an LGA peer review, an independent expert consultant, WSP, Mr. Lugg. This chap actually had worked at the County Council 30 years ago and had worked in my area as well as yours at the start of his career. The review included speaking to several other counties to see how they did things on their highways. There was very good cooperation from VIA. Officers involved in the review worked hard to make the review a success. 50 recommendations were approved unanimously in the final meeting. The quality of the report is excellent. I'll repeat right first time because we can all relate to that and we can all support that. So thank you very much, Chairman. And I'm happy to, well, delighted to second this report.
We'll all be delighted when we get on with this this piece of work, and hopefully residents will start to see the benefit. I don't know if, Adrian, if there's anything you want to add before I ask colleagues. Happy? Okay. Does anyone else like to speak to this report? I know we've discussed it in several other places. Mike?
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, absolutely. It's the right thing. I think we all recognise the difficulties that we've seen in highways previously, and you know, the continuation of pothole filling and pothole filling, and the issues that's raised as case studies for us all. So yeah, it's absolutely the right thing to do. My question really is, I know Councillor Cotty, we were working on around 25 million a year previously for Via to be able to keep a level peg in for us. I'm assuming that might change because of the detail of repair. In which case, where's that funding coming from? That's my big question, really.
Thank you. Worth highlighting the funding. I think we've always quite open about the willingness and the commitment to funding this as best we can. Obviously, it's a £10 billion asset, as I understand, and typically, therefore, in a private sector organisation that might seek to look after its assets, we'd have to spend about 20 times what we actually have available in order to do that. So it is an uphill battle, but we will make decisions about funding. I think that the key thing in my mind is that we need to make sure we've got these systems right and that we're spending that money on the right things and things that will be effective for residents before we commit to putting that funding in place. But we absolutely will have that conversation. You got my assurance around that, Mike?
Yeah, just to come back, my comment wasn't negative in any way. We recognise that, you know, that there's been difference of opinions, and we need to get over that. We need to move forward. And I think this is a positive move forward for everybody. And the funding issue is an issue that we've been across for a decade or more. We've all faced funding cuts, Richard in particular on finance and Jim on finance. But it's the one thing that raises its head every day with our residents when they walk outside of their doors and they see an issue. So, you know, collectively, and probably through you again at Westminster, to find extra funding that can be implemented through the progress like Councillor Ogle's talking about, that's exactly what we're all looking for.
Thanks, Mike. There hopefully are elements within this report that can help us to tackle some of these specific challenges raised by residents, not least the way that we choose or prioritise which areas get the initial kind of investment and support. But we're obviously going through the kind of budget conversations, as you know, and that is an active part of that consideration. So we'll come back to you on that. Keith.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think the funding is a thing, and I think it's been partly put on my shoulders to make sure that we get that funding in through the asset management side of my committee, and I look forward to cross-party support when I come to committees to sort of dispose of or do things with the land which will bring that funding in. So I really look forward to that. I particularly like this report, Chairman. I also like, in particular, recommendation 2, which is to keep the panel going so we can review it, see where it's working, see where it's not, and it's a moving feast rather than just having a piece of paper saying this is what we do. If it don't work, we'll look at it again in a year's time. We're going to review it. So I really like that part of the recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Keith. And worth saying, you know, that important we have that scrutiny because this is not something that will be rolled out and delivered tomorrow. It's going to take some time to change the way we approach things, cultures and everything else within Via and within the council, because there's things we're going to have to rebalance and change. So an ongoing work in progress. Jim.
Thank you, Chair. Again, welcome the report, and I'm very glad, as Councillor Girling was saying, that the team is actually going to be there to review, because I think it's an important issue. It's extremely important as to the states of our pavements as well. Now, I've been assured by Councillor Clark when I've mentioned it that the overall word in highways does cover pavements, but I'd like to see it a little bit highlighted a little bit more for our patch, because Carlton West, for anyone who's been there, is an extremely hilly ward. Carlton Hill in particular and Cavendish has got some very steep ones, and for those who may or may not know, just outside my boundary now, Frieda Avenue, one of the steepest in the country, and the pavements there aren't as good as they might be. So yes, the review on it, the highways itself, which I always think of highways as the roads, rightly needs priority, but at the same time, I think the pavements actually need to be highlighted a little bit more. I've been assured they will be by Councillor Clark, but at the same time, it's not absolutely clear here to the public that the highways include pavements. Everybody thinks of highways roads. So apart from that criticism, yeah, I hope it's working. I'd like to see it working. I particularly like your comment of get it right first time, and I do understand getting it right first time could take, instead of taking 10 minutes to fill, might take an hour to fill, etc., etc. So it'll be a bit slower, but won't be coming back, hopefully. So after a short time, hopefully it will start catching up on itself. So yeah, actually welcome the report. Welcome it's going to be reviewed. Just now to see it in operation, and no sarcasm, really good luck with it. I really do hope it works. We do need it.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate that. And as you say, a bit of work to get it all in train. On the point about pavements, worth saying and reiterating, the wording in the report is what it is, but from a kind of legal or management perspective, highways definitely does include pavements, and we are, it's highlighted in the report, I think the challenges we have, particularly recognise residents' concerns about what might be called a kind of unclassified roads and pavements, those residential streets and ones that residents see out of their window from that perspective, and those particular roads and pavements will be top of the agenda going forward. So hold us to account through the committee, of course. I know that you will. And we will we'll get cracking on it. Daniel.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, obviously, I welcome the report, and I really welcome your comments at the start, and I'm really pleased to hear them. Obviously, want to get it right first time. Taking a whole street approach, I think, is an absolutely fantastic thing, and I really do welcome most of the news in the report. Specifically, I was just wondering if I could have some clarification around the continuing use of the VIA fix. Obviously, under our paragraph 5, one of the key issues in the current situation, we recognised it as a particular local problem here around perception and everything else. And then, obviously, in the appendix under the first paragraph in the revenue maintenance programme, we talk about continuing to meet national timescales and acknowledge that this will require the continuing use of cold lay treatments similar to VIFIX in order to protect the safety of road users, etc. Whilst I accept that obviously there are some situations where it is always going to be needed, with us moving to this right repair, right first time approach, taking a more whole street holistic approach, I would naturally assume that this means that it's going to lead to quite a level in the reduction in the level of our use of VIFIX, and with it saying using treatments similar to that, does this mean, I hope, possibly more in hope than anticipation here, that we're going to move away completely from using it once we find other techniques that work? I mean, what's the situation with it? Could you provide me some clarity? Because obviously I feel that's one of the real big hitters that both the council and councillors get hit on with continuing use of subjects.
Yes, I think we've all had that throwages at various points, although obviously things that are statutory duties we have to do, particularly from a safety perspective, and there will be emergency repairs that we still have to make. Can't get away from that, but we are very much aware that there are some such issues where it's not an absolute emergency and needs kind of instant repair, where we are way ahead of the required timescales currently, and where we could actually take a little bit longer to get it right. And I think that's where the shift will no doubt happen. I don't know if there's anything, Adrian, on the particular technical elements of it, but from my perspective, I think one of the things we talked about through the course of the review was not telling the engineers how to do the engineering, but more kind of trying to set the policy and let them do the best thing by it. I think the key elements are going back to the communication point about residents having the detail and the understanding as to why this was the right repair in this particular instance, as to what the future plan is. Although we've come to emergency repair this bit today, your street is on the list to be resurfaced next year, or whatever it may be, making sure we're laying all of that out properly, which I don't think we've done necessarily in the past. So hopefully that is some reassurance. But in the short term, there will still no doubt be times when we have to use that as an emergency fix, but we would like to move away from that as much as we possibly can. All right. Further to add or not? No. Send you all home, you know. No, good. Who is next? Michelle.
Some of it's already been covered. I did want to quickly just mention pavements, as Councillor Creamer's already mentioned, as someone that regularly walks with a pushchair and a toddler and has a relative that has mobility issues. The pavements, quite frankly, are sometimes as worse as the roads with regards to how they are. So that's the first thing. The other thing is on page 47 of 64, I welcome the further investigation of the use of alternative weed spraying treatments. I don't necessarily agree about the little evidence of the long-term viability of anything else, but I do welcome any further investigation that could take place with that. And actually, Ben, you've already said the other bit that I was going to bring up, Els, with regards to the fact that communication is critical to this. If I can tell residents that Westall Lane is going to be done in 6 months' time, that will ease a lot of the issues that come through all of our inboxes. So, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that. I'm sure if there are conversations in due course you want to have with officers about weed spraying treatments, they would welcome that input. John Cotty.
Thank you, Leader. I'm keeping it short and sweet, but in the previous administration, a review in the last final year of the administration, I tried to push forward as officers were aware. I think it's right that we did the process on the new administration and to see what options we can bring forward and bring into updating us on how we do things. I was happy to be interviewed by both the reviews and the going forward from my experience of 4 years of highways. There is a bit of a sigh of relief that it's not within my portfolio because of the, should we say, the emails have dropped dramatically, Chairman. But what I would say, I think we're heading in the right direction. I know that councillors who've covered the responsibility for highways, etc., we're looking for changes. If you talk to them, even like Councillor Jackson and our Deputy Leader and others from the other side, were interested in trying to get the best deal out of what we've got. So I fully support what's come forward. I welcome the 50 recommendations. I'm not highlighting any because they're for the working group going forward, but I am pleased to see where we are and what we've achieved across party. So thank you.
Thank you, John, and worth recognising, as you say, the work that previous administration and yourself did in bringing forward the review and pushing that through, not least the sheer volume of work that you did in the previous 4 years trying to manage all of this. Fewer questions at full council now, probably, as well, but very grateful for that. Really helpful. Richard Buller.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, like everyone else, I appreciate this. A really good piece of work done by colleagues and cross-party. Excellent. I welcome it all. In particular, though, I think as one or two colleagues have said, the right first time and the whole street approach are particular highlights from my point of view, and I would imagine from most residents' point of view, because how many times have we seen when a road has been repaired, whether it's a planned repair or a pothole repair, how many times have we seen that within a few feet of a repair, there is another one needed? And you think to yourself, well, surely can't you do the while we're here approach? Well, while we're here doing this, can we not do that? And in the past, there's been all sorts of reasons why that hasn't been possible. But I think that's all been recognised, along with all the other issues that we're discussing today. So let's look forward to this having a real impact on the improvements in the roads and indeed the pavements as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Absolutely agree with that. I've got Richard Jackson, and then I'll come.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. First of all, I should have declared an interest because I'm one of the council's directors of VIA, although that's just a personal interest. I took part in the peer review and had a long interview with the consultant, and actually I think everything that I raised at both those sessions is in the report, so I'm really pleased to see it. And as I was talking to them, I know I was not alone in having raised everything that I raised. I think we probably all said almost exactly the same things. One of the things I want to do actually is to recognise how far we've come and actually the performance of the highways team over the last few years, because there's a lot of talk about potholes and it's a national problem and the condition of roads nationally is an issue. We're very high performers on B roads and on A roads. I think we're top in one and top three in the other. Second and fourth, I'm told. John knows far better than I do. So actually, you know, it wasn't all bad. We should recognise that. And we've innovated a lot. John, over the last 4 years, innovated a lot with new equipment and technology that came about. But it's always good to do a comparison and almost a clean sheet of paper approach to things. As far as the extra investment goes, I think we need to look at exactly what's going to come out of this in the end technically and how it will all be implemented. Money isn't always just the answer to everything. And things, as Richard just said, things like a whole street approach, I'm convinced will actually save us money, quite apart from delivering a better service, because I'm sure a huge part of the cost of a repair is sending half a dozen operatives out, a lorry and a load of plant to do the job. If they're going to come back 2 weeks later after the next frost to do the next pothole along, I'm sure actually there's efficiencies and savings that come out of that. So we wait to see exactly what will be needed in terms of additional resources. But I think there's a clear commitment that we will do what we need to do really to improve the highways for everybody.
Thanks, Richard. That's absolutely right. I think it speaks to the point I made earlier about wanting to make sure that we're funding the things that work and doing that in the most effective way. So a very fair point. Gordon, come to you.
Thank you, Ben. We'll be brief. As part of the recommendations, Ben, on page 41, it talks about improving our communications. That's something the bioasset management team needs to do now, not wait for all this to go through. Communication is not good still. It really isn't. Our district manager is fantastic. I absolutely no issues with her. She's just great. But sometimes she doesn't even get told from the asset management side about what's going on. And residents certainly do not know. So I absolutely endorse this, but it really needs to happen now. We need to tell residents if we can't do something, why we can't do it, and when we are going to do it. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Gordon. Again, fair point. I think we all recognise that communication, particularly with residents, has been lacking, or sometimes I think more technical than perhaps it needed to be. I think we've all had examples of that. One of the things and recommendations elsewhere in the lengthy list might be one of those that Adrian didn't like my description as dry, but from a structural perspective, more of that communication will come back to us as a council. I think the key difference perhaps is whilst from a Vire's perspective, we are the customer, from our perspective, of course, the residents are, and we have that incentive to communicate with them as effectively as we can. Hopefully that helps us to bridge that gap to some extent. In the absence of anybody else, all I would like to do finally is just to, in his absence, thank Councillor Clark for his leadership of this. Been an intensive piece of work and some interesting meetings on the panel as well, I understand, but he's really thrown his weight behind it and really been passionate and committed to delivering an outcome that has been cross-party and that we can all get behind and support now, and I know he'll continue to do that as we try to roll it out. So hopefully he is well in his hospital bed somewhere, as I understand, but he will be back with us to drive that forward very soon. So thank you, Councillor Clark. Brings me then just to vote on the recommendations. So all those in favour of that report? Thank you very much. And we move on to the next one, which is provision of primary school places in East Leek, which I'm going to find in this big folder of things. So in order to propose, I'm going to come over to Councillor Girling actually to speak to this.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. East Leek is a growing village with increasing demands for primary school places which existing schools cannot meet, and this report sets out proposals to provide additional school places from September 2022 to meet the growing need and to ensure that East Leek children can go to primary schools in the village. It is proposed that a new school be built on land provided by 2 housing developers as part of their Section 106 contributions, and to meet the demand, it is proposed that accommodation is provided in a temporary village from September 2022 with a new build permanent 1.5 form of entry primary school with 26 place nursery placing the temporary facility once completed, targeted at opening in September 2023. The provision of the new school places in this phased manner is estimated at costing £13.62 million to be funded through Section 106 contributions and the Basic Needs Programme. I formally move the recommendations which are on page 4 of this report.
Thank you. Have I got a seconder for that?
Second that, Chairman, and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've got both Matt Neal and in the room, and I think Colin on the line I can see. So I don't know if either of you got anything to add at this point. Happy? Can't see Colin, but unless he chips in, I'm going to assume he's happy.
Nothing to add, Chair.
Great, thank you. Anyone would like to speak to this report or ask any questions at this stage?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I realise that decisions were taken some years ago, and it's not anyone's responsibility in the current administration in how the 106s were drawn up between 2015 and 2017. But could I just clarify, are we actually saying that we're getting extra monies from the government? Because it sort of reads in paragraph 13 that on page 53 that of the 13.62 million, the 3.52 million that's sort of additional costs for a temporary arrangement is actually of no cost to Nottinghamshire residents. It's from the government and 106s. Am I correct in that thinking?
Thanks, Francis. I think so. Does Matt want to? Yeah, Keith?
Yeah, Francis. What it is obviously 106 money is gathered in the traditional way. I think historically it's not been brilliant in terms of how that 106 has been allocated for schools provision. That's why it's gone through my committee just recently, where we've reviewed 106 agreements with the districts and borough councils, which requires an input from us. So hopefully moving forward that there'll be a greater supply of 106 money for such provisions as schools. What it refers to in the report is what's called the Basic Needs Programme, which is government money, which they allocate to areas of great need, of which this is. So that's where we're getting the money from, which will cover it, really.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The issue of Section 106 monies is a particularly difficult one in the two-tier system that we have, because it's the district authorities that actually ask for the Section 106 money. The County Council asks, on the basis of a formula, for a certain amount of Section 106 money from a district council in terms of any development that's going on. But we can't force them to ask for it from the developer. And often what happens is that they will get what is called a viability study on a piece of land that's going to be developed. And the viability study always comes in and says, well, it won't support the amount of Section 106 money that you are asking for. So immediately there is a shortfall. And we've been experiencing this at Broxtowe Borough Council fairly recently over the past 12 months, where the County Council have asked for money where there have been new developments, and Broxtowe Borough Council have said, oh no, the land won't support that. We want it anyway for affordable housing, so get lost, County Council. You'll have to fund it yourself. And so it's an issue really, Chairman, that needs raising nationally, because we can't go on like this. It really is not fair. It means that we can't plan effectively, and the districts are quite frankly getting away with murder.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Fair challenge. I think there's obviously new planning legislation coming forward on a national level, and that is part of the conversation. I don't know what the detail of that is yet. Equally, through our local kind of collaboration and working more closely with district and borough colleagues, we can seek to try and address that in some way, I'm sure. I don't know if there's anything to add on those particular. Yeah, Keith?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Philip. I think historically that some districts and boroughs have been a lot better of providing the 106 money to Nottinghamshire County Council for such provision than others. On my trips around meeting my counterparts at such boroughs and districts, that's been part of the conversation. And I think with what the leaders now doing in terms of collaboration with districts and boroughs and the devolution, I think we're getting in a more stable position to make sure that we do get that provision. Absolutely, it's a national problem, and absolutely it needs to go that way as well. But I personally get the sense of feeling, particularly with our new policy in terms of that now, that there's greater cooperation. And that was definitely the feeling I got from those traditionally that weren't very good at providing the 106.
Thanks, Keith. Worth saying, I do think there is a better working relationship with a lot of our district and borough colleagues than perhaps there has been. And equally, the conversation and making the point to them that every bit of capital money we have to spend on a school in the absence of Section 106 is capital money we can't spend on something else in the borough. So it comes back around in the end. Absolutely.
That's made very clear as well, I can assure you.
Good. Anybody else who wants to speak to this? No? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few points to make, I think. Again, thank you to officers, because I know that this has been a major feat of diplomacy and tenacity, frankly, to get us to this point. So I'm particularly grateful to officers for what they've done in that. Draw colleagues' attention to paragraph 8, which references specifically that fortunately we've been able to develop good partnership arrangements with both of the developers. This is a split site in the hands of two partners. So it has been no mean feat to get it here. And we do have good, strong relationships. It references the developers there. I would also add that I think those relationships with district and borough partners have significantly strengthened in recent times. A sort of a side note, I believe that our recent consultation on a new developer contribution policy has recently closed, so I would anticipate that there will be a paper coming, I think, to Councillor Girling's committee on that shortly, and that is incredibly detailed and clear about what we expect our district and borough colleagues to seek in terms of developer contributions and exactly why. So it's there for the world to see why this is so important. So I do expect better help and partnership working there. And I suppose just to sum up on what this is about, yes, the sums of money are eye-watering. They always are to build a new school, but this is about creating school places for children, much needed school places for children. And with the complexities of this particular site, its funding and literally the logistics for building, officers have gone above and beyond to ensure that we can meet the needs of children. I see that I've got Mike Sharp in the room as well, who has been covering a lot of that advanced pupil place planning. So he's been doing the number crunching that Matt Neal's team are then trying to deliver buildings for. So between them, they are identifying need and they are seeking to meet it in a timely fashion. I'm grateful to both teams for doing that, Chairman, and I heartily recommend this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. That's really positive to hear. I add my thanks to officers for the work that they've done on this to bring it forward. It's only left then, I think, just to vote on the report. So if all those in favour could raise their hand. Thank you very much. That is approved. Which brings us on to agenda item number 8, which is to discuss the integrated rail plan in the East Midlands. Obviously, again, we gave a commitment to bring this back to Policy Committee and discuss the implications of it. The main kind of announcements are listed there in the report, so I won't repeat them. Worth noting, and obvious, I think, to all of us, that it's not absolutely everything that has been discussed in the past, but it is a very significant investment that allows us to unlock a significant amount of the benefits of the various strategies and local plans that are in place around, particularly around sites around Towton and obviously around East Midlands Parkway, not least our wider projects, Freeport Development Corporation and all the other things that we discuss on a regular basis. I, for one, am very happy to welcome nearly £13 billion of investment, which is not something that happens in the East Midlands very often, probably not since the M1 was built, I would imagine, which goes back some time. So regardless of the view on the wider, promises kept or not, I think a very significant investment in our area that unlocks significant opportunity for us to create jobs and to link our residents to those jobs, which perhaps is the key bit of this levelling up agenda we keep talking about. So really positive in my view. You'll see that the recommendations alongside obviously welcoming the announcement of funding make the point about going back to government now to clarify the next steps in terms of both the delivery mechanisms for these projects, whether that's DevCo or otherwise, in terms of giving us certainty of delivery. I was pleased to hear Michael Gove say at the County Council Network conference last week that everything in the IRP is funded and will be delivered. That is really helpful because unlike other parts of the country where the IRP focused very much on national and regionally significant projects, lots of our local projects were listed in this report, not least Maid Marian Line, Robin Hood Line and others. So if that is the commitment from government, that is very welcome and certainly to our benefit. And we have meetings already in the diary with those nationally, Rail Minister next week, for example, to talk about the next steps in terms of bringing those specific projects forward. So look forward to those conversations and getting that clarity. But I'm happy to propose this report. Have I got a seconder for that?
I'll speak now, if I may. I think there's an awful lot to welcome in this report. I mean, I share your view. There's some disappointment about HS2, but I think we need to park that. I've been involved in this from the beginning, 10 years or so ago, when I had the transport brief here. It was between, the HS2 station was between a site in Erewash, which was in the floodplain, and the site at Towton, and we got on with the job and convinced government that that should be the preferred site at Towton. Ever since then, though, there's always been a question mark over HS2, whether it would come or not. It's never been certain. What we've actually got now is some certainty, even if it's not the absolute decision we would have liked. But because there's been that question mark, and I was heavily involved then as leader of Broxtowe, with making sure that we developed what we wanted to see on the Towton site that would work with or without HS2. And the worst case scenario is that there'd be nothing there in terms of rail, and we're a long way from that because we're going to get a mainline station there, which, you know, it's much more than a halfway house. And I get very frustrated in the last couple of weeks at politicians, district council leaders, others locally, who have described this as being a disaster. I've heard senior figures at Broxtowe say this is a disaster for Broxtowe. It's far from a disaster for Broxtowe. It's a huge amount of investment coming in. We can still get the same number of jobs, the same amount of employment, the same number of new homes on and around the site there as a result of what we've got in this. It's far from a consolation prize. There's a lot of good news in this. It goes further because we talked then about the Robin Hood line to Ollerton. 10 years or so ago, I remember going on an observation car. I think Richard was with us. And we were greeted by train spotters at every station because they've been tipped off that we were in this observation car. But it actually showed that the journey from Ollerton to the Towton sidings, because we came back on what is still only a freight line, and so you don't get to travel on that as a passenger. It was in no time at all. You know, something takes you an hour to drive and probably 2 or 3 hours on different modes of public transport to try and get between those two places. We were there in what seemed like about 15 minutes, and it shows the potential that's there all the way for communities all the way up and down that line to unlock the potential that still is at the Towton site, and then more widely on the 3 sites which are going to be within the Development Corporation. So there's a lot to support in this, and I think it's time actually that politicians elsewhere got behind this, stopped talking it down, because we're in a national competition to attract inward investment onto that site and others around here, and it's for the good of everybody locally. So it's time that people actually stop talking this down, because if there's one thing that could turn this into a failure, it's a lot of people locally telling everybody out there that this is a disaster. It isn't a disaster. There's a lot of good news, and I think we all ought to get behind it now.
Thank you, Richard. A very fair point, and I've made similar in other meetings. I think it's worth, regardless of expectations or whatever, recognising that we have several £100 million of investment in Towton and in Broxtowe that we didn't have a fortnight ago, not least in commitments to road, tram, rail links, and from perhaps a more selfish perspective, up in the north of the county, those Maid Marian Robin Hood lines. I keep coming back to, levelling up agendas, and I know colleagues don't like the phrase, nor do I necessarily, but to me that's the meaning of it, is creating those jobs and getting residents in places like Mansfield and Ashfield and over to Edwinstowe and Ollerton, being able to access them. That is hugely important to our levelling up within the county as much as nationally. So lots to welcome, absolutely. I don't know if there's any, I'm just thinking whether there's anything to add further to report. Adrian, happy? Jolly. All right, any questions I'm sure we can answer. Does anyone else wish to speak to this report? Mike.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm slightly surprised to see this here, to be quite honest. And I think your point one in your recommendation is completely patronising. We've had nearly 12 years of underinvestment. We recognise 13 billion is a huge amount, and we applaud that investment, but let's not think that that's the be-all and end-all of everything. And I really did not want to be negative about this. But I went on a health walk yesterday with residents, about 27 of them, and they battered me about the Robin Hood line. How many times it's become a political football, as well, you know, and just really want, especially from the IRP, with the exploration comment that's made in there, there's no definitive for that, and that's false for the Robin Hood line and for the Maid Marian line. So commitment is what we're looking for. Clarity, funding. We recognise it. I know, Richard, you said you went away in 2010. We were invited in 2016, I think, but you didn't make that one. And I think at that time it was 24 million to get the engine on the line, with an investment of 750k to this council. There's going to be relative things there that need addressing, so that we can, especially from a funding point of view. And the ticket prices in particular, they're something that are got to be high on the agenda when we're moving forward with this. You know, it's just a waned anticipation feeling, to be honest, when we talk. I'm pleased that you keep promoting that Michael Gover said the Robin Hood line and Maid Marian's going ahead. Oh, fantastic. Tell me when, because I've got 2 pages here today. Honestly, the next report has got to be better than this when it comes back to us. The detail has got to be better, because it's a detail that is going to make it the investment that we're being promised, and the detail that we'll be able to discuss in here, because at the minute it's not there. And I'll be asking members to abstain on this today. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I think that's a shame, having said that you would applaud the 13 billion investment, that you don't feel able to welcome in paragraph 1, but understand the position. Worth saying, and as I've said already, that there are next to no other areas in the country where local projects like the Maid Marian or Robin Hood line are listed in the IRP, which is a statement of nationally significant transport infrastructure. The reason that ours are is because of the case that we've made and the push that we've given over many months to try and make sure that there are those firmer commitments to delivering our local things. Clearly, having listed them in there, the timescales of those local projects don't come under that nationally kind of significant bracket in the same way that £12 billion of railway line between Birmingham and Nottingham do. So we do need to go and have those conversations. As I've said, meeting the Rail Minister next week to start those conversations, and a number of those projects that you mentioned are already in train in terms of bidding and delivery planning of those things. Maid Marian line in the Restoring Your Railways Fund, as you know. Robin Hood line we've discussed around levelling up fund proposals, but we need to understand government's expectation now in terms of, you know, are we going through those processes, or do we sidestep those, or what? And that's the next conversation we need to have. So understand that need for clarity. We need it too, and that is the next discussion. That's already in the diary, particularly on those rail projects next week. So we will bring that back when we've got that clarity. Jim.
Yeah, thank you. Just to agree with Mike there, that really we actually do need some more details. I know what you're saying, but welcome to there's been lots of positive commitments from the government that just haven't come through, like 40 hospitals, for instance, just pure instance. But item 4, agree to a further report being brought to committee. That one, perhaps it should be the further report with more details. It would have been nice to know as well. Are we going, because I've heard it's going to happen, I heard it's not going to happen within the linking of the East Midlands, etc., with the electrification of the Midland Main Line back on. I'd like to know if it's back on or not. I mean, now that they've started building the bi-units, it probably isn't. But I would like some confirmation on that. The actual how it's going to work with East Midlands Parkway in the middle of nowhere, yes, I know it's going to save time from Birmingham, but it's going to be diversions there as well. It's going to be a very big, I'd like to see how that works. It's a very tight little area that, if you actually know it, there's a bridge on one side, and on the other side there's a tunnel. So you can't actually make a great deal of room in that area. So, yeah, it would be nice. And perhaps the next one, when it comes back, when we've got more detail, more actual commitment, perhaps some even times in there, that we'll actually have, this study or whatever it's going to be will be done by such and such, hoping to get it in by such and such. But there's not 2 pages for such a big project to actually just bring that to this committee. We can agree with the aims of it, but without any detail in it, I can't, it's why we're abstaining. It's just without the actual detail, we don't know. And it's just saying, go on as we are. We don't want to go on as we are. We want actually more commitment from the government. I know we've got commitments on every side of this chamber, but we actually need more commitment, more solid commitment, so it doesn't actually disappear down a tunnel someplace. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I don't think it says we're going on as we are at all. It says we're welcoming £13 billion of additional work and investment, which is very much not where we are or have been for the last 10, 20 years. But just pick up on some of the points there. I'm intrigued as to how you know that 40 hospitals are not being built, because as I'm aware that commitment's only been made in the last 12 to 18 months, and they don't build many hospitals in that period of time. There's one in Nottinghamshire, in fact, that is part of that scheme, which is really welcome. Midland Main Line has been committed to. The Secretary of State said in the Chamber during the statement that work will commence on the Midland Main Line electrification from Harborough to Sheffield before Christmas, which is really welcome to hear. Additional planning and work that needs to go into that before spades hit ground, but that work he has committed will start before Christmas. In terms of Parkway, it's frustrating to keep hearing this suggestion that Parkway is in the middle of nowhere because it's not the destination. Nor is it the end of the line. Trains will go directly into Nottingham and Derby city centre. Government's made its explanation for that pretty clear, which is a logical one, that you want to connect those economic hubs, those cities together. So it's not the case that trains will go from Birmingham to Parkway. Trains will go on into Derby and Nottingham city centre, and may still in the future go through Towton, because there are various options laid out as to how you might go north between these Midlands and Sheffield. It is a 2-page, 3-page report because it's a summary of the 100-odd page report that we thought you probably wouldn't want to sift through for policy committee, but I have got the full IRP in my office. If you want to read it, Jim, you are very welcome to come and do so. Can come and have one. Anybody else wish to speak to this? Keith.
Yeah, I think it'd be remiss of me not to comment, being Chairman of Economic Development Asset Management Committee Chairman. I think from personal experience, where as a deputy leader in another place, where we got a £25 million investment, which is bringing in a roughly £500 million of external investment. If you equate that to the £12 billion this is going to bring into our council, we're looking at some major investments coming in, which I can't see how people can look at that in a negative way. And I think Richard made a really valid point about how we now communicate about the money we're going to get, because we're not only looking for inward investment of a significant scale, we're also looking at organisations and groups that can help deliver what we need to deliver. And we know with all the money that's being put out there by the government all over the country, demand for the top quality people to deliver is going to be hard. Yeah, because they've got great choice, and when you get great choice, they'll go where they want to go. We've got to show them actually that we're geared up, we're ready. You come and work with us, we'll make it all happen. And I think that's really significant that all of us, no matter if we think it's a great thing or not, have a responsibility to put out there to those sorts of people. And things that, I think some of us have been in this game long enough to know that we all have ambitions. So the government have had an ambition in terms of delivery of HS2. We've had lots of ambitions in terms of what we want to deliver, and sometimes things change that have to reflect those ambitions. Things aren't black and white. People out there see black and white because they don't get the detail that we get. We get the detail. We shouldn't see it in black and white. We should see it in all the colours of grey that comes with things like this. And again, I think that's our responsibility to promote what we've got. £12 billion investment into this county, and in the whole of the plan, the report that came out, I think I'm right in saying, Chairman, that Nottinghamshire projects were the only ones named in that, and yet people are casting doubt on whether or not those projects are going to happen or not. I think for the government to put something in a report where other councils are saying we're the big winners in this, and we're saying, oh, you know, it's not enough. So I think it's all about attitude. I think it's about whether you're a positive person or you're a negative person. I'm personally very positive. I think if we all work hard and work together for this, we're going to produce an incredible amount of investment into this county, which will benefit not just around the Broadway or around Towton or around that end of the county. It's going to spread into the whole of Nottinghamshire. And I represent Newark on the far side of Nottinghamshire. And I'd be very surprised if we don't benefit from this investment, very surprised. So if you're just a little bit further north, i.e. you're in Mansfield or Ashfield, you know, and to be negative about this, it would be, well, it beggars belief to me, to be honest, Chairman. So I'm optimistic. I think we've got our ducks in a row to make this happen, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the reports coming forward of our successes. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Keith. You're right that clearly, you know, the delivery of all of this is our responsibility in part. We're part of that collaboration that will have to do that. We have got our ducks in a row because this speaks to the wider package of things that we've been talking about around job creation, around a vehicle to deliver all of this. We have that. And again, that vehicle is mentioned in the report in terms of acceleration and helping us to bring all of that forward. So absolutely true. Newark set to benefit from upgrades to the East Coast main line, which will be very positive, and potentially, again, one of the options to go from East Midlands to the north is via Nottingham to the East Coast main line also. So lots of potential in there for the east of the county as well from that perspective. Philip.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. If there is any common sense around HS2, I think that the IRP is very much a step in the right direction. I will not dwell on Towton as a destination or an original destination for HS2, but it never made sense to me that HS2 was not going to go either into Nottingham direct or into Derby direct or both. And now we have a plan that is proposing to do just that. And therefore, as I say, I think that is a step in the right direction. But we in Nuttall, and I know I'm being very parochial now and will be accused of NIMBYism, well, I have to say I'm an unashamed NIMBY, because my backyard is the backyard of the residents who have elected me to sit in this place. What particularly disappoints us and stopped us popping the champagne corks when the IRP was announced is the fact that there is a sentence in that which says the current route is still safeguarded. And indeed, HS2 lost no time in writing out to residents. I got a letter within 2 or 3 days, although I'm not directly affected, my road isn't directly affected, almost gloating on the fact that the route is still safeguarded. Now, I have to say, Chairman, that this is not only unfair, it's downright cruel, because people who are in the line of the route are still affected. Many of them simply don't want to move out of their homes. That's even if they can agree a fair price with HS2, which has proved increasingly difficult. And it has a huge impact on my community at Nuttall. The parish council's base will cease to exist for a period of 10 years during the construction phase. The church next door will find it difficult to operate. And then, of course, with the construction traffic around Junction 26 and the B600, we shall have 10 years of roads being clogged up. And that is still safeguarded. Now, as I say, that is cruel. After so long a period of time, that we can't be released from that is simply not acceptable. I note that there is going to be, or so we are told, an early decision on the way forward. It is a great pity that decision couldn't have come at the same time. I urge you, with your contacts, to get this sorted as soon as possible and take this blight and this worry from the communities, not just mine, there will be others that are affected as well, because it simply is not fair.
Thank you, Philip. I totally recognise that uncertainty, in particular for residents in Broxtowe, and you're right to point out that significant impact on local residents. I think that's part of the next conversation we need to have in terms of delivery of these various projects and that certainty on delivery. They've given us a timescale within the IRP of 12 to 18 months for a firm decision as to the route as to how it goes north, and at that stage, we should have that certainty for your residents. I certainly am of the view that the sooner the better, as I know you are. So we'll continue to make that case and make sure that Broxtowe is able to benefit both from the investment and then the certainty in terms of that route and planning. And I'll take that away when I have those conversations nationally. I don't know if there's anybody else who wants to speak to this report. John.
Thanks, Leader. Along with a couple of my colleagues on the right, we've sat in this chamber for over 20 years. And whether it's a Labour administration or a Conservative administration, every time we look at the funding pots that come, whether it's education, whether it's adult social care or highways, we're bottom. So I'm embracing this with every bit of squeeze I've got in my arms. If you're going to put £13 billion into the economy of Nottinghamshire, which actually affects the whole of Nottinghamshire, wherever you're here, because Councillor Girling's telling us the impact it'll have on Newark. Well, we've got areas in Rushcliffe that don't have a bus service to take people who can't afford a car to work at East Midlands Airport or to work at Amazon or wherever it is in the area that's being built up as a free port. But we're going to get that. Nobody's said certainly what the route's going to be or how it's going to be put forward, but certainly for people being able to engage in jobs they probably couldn't do before, which brings them a better reward and betters our communities and areas, even Ashfield and Mansfield and the north, then I'm going to embrace, because I've seen too many of us getting nothing. So my residents are quite happy that's what's going to happen in that area around the airport, etc. So you've got me straight on board, and I would like to thank you. Sorry, croaking. It's not that. It's not, no. It wasn't, honestly, Ben. I want to thank you and the leader and officers for the work they've done to bring this forward. So thank you very much, and I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that. We have, as an authority, and Anthony and Adrian in particular, put a lot of work into these conversations with government over the last few months, and a lot of the things that are in it were not in it 6 months ago, it's worth saying. It's not a coincidence that they have returned. So appreciate those comments. And Councillor Girling touched earlier upon the wider economic benefits of some of this, creating those hubs, whether it's Parkway or Toton, creating those transport links, and what that can do in terms of inward investment, job creation and everything else goes way beyond the capital investment in trains alone. So there is a huge benefit over the next few decades for all of our residents, I think, from this. Richard.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, you've just touched on it, actually. It's not just about the railway, is it, and transport. It is all the investment that goes with it, as John and others have just said. And also, really, just to pick up on the Parkway point, it's not in the middle of nowhere. It is next door to the existing airport. And look what's happening at the airport with its expansion and all the Amazons and all the warehouses and things that are being built now and are to come. We've got the MCO work to come as well. And so this is absolutely crucial to the economic development of the whole area. I get the position the opposition is in, because you're on the opposition. You've got to find something negative to say, and it's difficult to really say anything negative about this for all the reasons we've heard this morning. The billions of pounds that's coming in, And all the extra benefits will come as well as the rail links and the transport links that are fundamental. And finally, on a lighter note, as Richard mentioned, whenever it was, 10 or 11 years ago, we did get onto this fascinating train that took us from Nottingham Station and up the Robin Hood line, and then it broke off on the Maid Marian line. I don't think I realised at the time it was the Maid Marian line, but it was. And we went to Ollerton, and there was an old station there, and we could see straight away what a wonderful opportunity this could be someday in the future for it to be reopened again. And this was probably before other parts of the country were talking about opening up the old lines closed under beaching. So we were thinking about this so many years ago. And the reaction we got, as Richard said, train spotters did come out and watch us, and you know, it felt quite important for a few minutes. We're on this sort of glass carriage, driving along being driven along this long disused railway line. But seriously, it did show how efficient and how helpful that will be to one day in the future. To build on or to improve the economy there. And it looks very much as if that day is coming. And it's in the report here, and we really should welcome this. And whatever you're asking for, you'll never get everything you want, whatever you're asking for. But heavens above, we've got a pretty good deal here, so well done all involved.
Thank you, Richard.
Chairman, it was slightly disconcerting at one point when the driver got out and squirted fairy liquid on the points to make sure that they worked.
Yes, I forgot that, yeah.
We'll make sure that that's dealt with before it becomes a passenger line. Yeah, worth emphasising, we touched on the package earlier. You mentioned there, Richard, that Parkway, although it is in a rural location, is surrounded by all sorts of sites that are ripe for development and job creation. And actually, the future of East Midlands Airport is very much tied to the economic growth around that area as well. And the amount that airport contributes to our economy is hugely important. So lots of benefits. Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to echo the comments that have been made on this side of the chamber. This is a tremendous result for Nottinghamshire. I know, from my office being next door but one to yours, the amount of time you've spent at Westminster, along with the Chief Executive and the Deputy Chief Executive, lobbying and working on behalf of Nottinghamshire County Council and Nottinghamshire as a place for our communities and residents. The achievement that you've got here, and it should not be underestimated, the amount of money that's going to be invested in Nottinghamshire as a result of the efforts of yourself and senior officers. We've had criticism of the report that's before us. This is the biggest investment in Nottinghamshire in living memory. If we'd have not put a report before committee today, there'd have been a question of why not? Well, what is it that you're ashamed of? What is it you're embarrassed about? Why haven't you actually given the opportunity for this committee, the most senior committee effectively, not to have a discussion about the integrated rail plan? So we put a report in to allow that opportunity, and we're told this is a waste of time, these scraps of paper, you're telling us nothing. It's actually, as you quite rightly pointed out, an executive summary of a much larger document. The detail will follow. The meeting that you and officers will have with ministers will provide that detail. We've heard already that we've got the assurances in relation to the electrification of the Midland Main Line. That's openly been announced by government. We've been given the assurances that the Maid Marian Line and the Robin Hood Line are already fully funded and accounted for in the government spending plans for the future. I think the problem when you actually have a term opposition is that it infers that you have to oppose. Well, I don't actually see that. When you get good news for Nottinghamshire, then surely part of the opposition as a grouping in this council is to welcome the good news. Now, I know that's anathema to be able to congratulate a Conservative administration of securing a good deal from a Conservative government. But this is on behalf of Nottinghamshire, not on behalf of the Conservative Party. So, come on, please, welcome good news for Nottinghamshire.
Thanks, Chris. Worth adding to those thanks. There's a few people, I think particularly Midlands Connect, particularly Sir John Peace, Maria Mashinkosis and others at Midlands Connect who did an awful lot of technical work behind the scenes and provided government with an awful lot of information to help us make sure that Toton in particular was listed in this announcement, because that hasn't always been guaranteed by any stretch of the imagination. So grateful to them also. I've just got Francis left.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got fed up last week with my phone pinging at me and your face appearing on some news release of some fantastic deal for Nottinghamshire. So eventually I gave up when I saw your face plastered all over the TV and decided to read the IRP, which took most of the weekend actually to get into. And I do agree with your colleagues and colleagues across the chamber there that this is good news, and I think those that have poured cold water on the announcements probably overdid that a bit unfairly. So well done for your efforts last week. Praising the government and the opportunities that might be coming our way. But I think, if I may say so, perhaps we need an element of the Collingham voice here, and with respect to her, of course. But someone would be saying, "Hold on." I mean, I could say to you, I feel bruised because I can't even get a tip in Rushcliffe that was promised and, manifestoed and all of that, despite banging on people's doors for 4 years. So when I looked at this document, there are a lot in it, or there is a lot in it, that's aspirational. And I'm a bit of a HS2 skeptic, but I realise that that argument is gone. We're going to get HS2 in some form, presumably. But I actually think the Maid Marian and Robin Hood lines will probably have a greater effect on more people in Nottinghamshire. That's my opinion. And they are valuable gains if we get them. What concerns me, though, Mr. Chairman, is, it's slightly not committed. It's we will look to. And I just wonder whether we've just got to be careful and not overinflate expectations in the public that, they're not guaranteed or they don't appear to be guaranteed, but I could be wrong. I certainly hope it comes through to fruition because clearly it is a lot of money that's been invested.
Thanks, Francis. I think your comments there chime with government's explanation of their proposals nationally, where they, I think my colleague Lee Anderson was mentioned in the foreword of the report, if you've read it, you'll have seen, saying that he thinks residents would rather be able to hop on a local service than see a fast train go past that they can't get on. And I think there is an element of that, and those local connections will be really important in bringing people to jobs and to leisure opportunities. Robin Hood Line in particular might tie us into Sherwood Forest and those tourism opportunities in a really positive way. But we do need to go and get that delivery plan. And as I say, that's very much the next conversation. Those meetings are already in the diary, or some of them are, certainly. In terms of the early point, you mentioned the kind of media stuff, and I think it's important, but less so about praising government, but more the point that Councillor Jackson made earlier on about promoting this investment and these sites, these opportunities to attract private sector investment, that we need to be out there as an authority and our partners need to be out there saying this is a brilliant opportunity for people to come and bring money into our county, to create jobs in our county. People have criticised the announcements around Toton, but if I were a business looking to create jobs and invest, why would I not want to go to a site that's just had hundreds of millions of pounds of transport investment committed to it by government? There aren't many sites like that around the country. So huge opportunities, and as I say, that willingness to go out there and talk about it in a positive way, I think actually is important for all of us to be able to see this come to fruition. So welcome those comments, and we'll go and get that certainty, and we will bring it back, no doubt, to probably this committee at some point in the future. I think that was everybody, unless anybody's got Anything further? Don't think so. Right, okay, we will vote then on this report. All those in favour of those recommendations on page 59. Do we need to count? Are we counting? Keep your hands up then while we do counting, Gordon.
Francis, were you in favour? Thank you.
All those against? And abstentions? I'm just going to make everyone keep their hand up a little bit longer. Just Okay, thank you very much. That has been counted. 12 votes for, 8 abstentions, so that vote is carried. Thank you very much. That brings us just finally then to our work programme. You'll see it is noted there. I've already flagged this morning with colleagues a couple of those things that maybe cross over with other committees elsewhere in the council, so we'll make a judgment as to whether they need to come here or can be dealt with in those committees. Is there anything else anyone would like to say or add in terms of the work programme? Chris?
Just one comment, Chair. I know that we were all lauding the achievements of Councillor Neil Clark earlier in the report, and obviously he's somewhere between knighthood and sainthood, but we have promoted him to OBE in the papers rather than MBE. I'm assuming that's just forward thinking, is it?
Yeah, we'll demote him immediately, please. Very good. All right then, in the absence of anything further, thank you for your time today. We'll see you all again soon.